Welcome in and thanks for joining us for this special edition of TPI Talk. My name is Scott Hardy and I'm pleased to partner with Tallapoosa Publishers and the Alexander City Outlook as we reflect back and highlight the 150th anniversary of Alexander City. Today I'm joined by a special guest, someone who is a very familiar name here in town, and that's Mr. David Boleware. Mr. Boleware, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Scott. I look forward to this interview.
Yes, sir. So before we dive into some things, can you just give us a little background on yourself and your relationship with the community?
Well, Scott, it started probably back after I finished high school. My first desire was to go on to college. I attended what was then known as the Alex City Junior College. Then I took off some time, worked. Then eventually I transferred to Auburn, where I graduated with a degree in business administration, personnel management. From there, I decided that I wanted to get involved with the education system, and once my children were of school age, I wanted to make sure that they were getting a quality education. At the time that I was in school, it was still in a segregated system. So from my first year in elementary school to my 12th year, it was totally segregated. But it was, believe it or not, it was sort of common. It wasn't something, it was just part of the system at the time. We didn't really give it that much thought as far as getting the same quality education as the students did in the white school system. But later on we found out, and we could see a lot of difference from even the textbooks. We would always get this hand-me-down. And when it came to materials, we would always get what was passed over from the white school system. I learned out that wasn't really equal education, but as I said, it was something that we had grown up and gotten used to until we finally realized it wasn't the best way to get a quality education.
Yes, sir. You're speaking about education, and you're someone that's been an advocate for education in our community for quite some time, before and after integration, and you're speaking about segregation in the school system, but one of the more historic buildings and schools in this community was Laurel High, and if you wouldn't mind giving us a little background on that in the community.
Exactly. First of all, Laurel High at the time was known as the Alexander City Colored School, and it wasn't until 1948 that we got our first full-time principal, a man by the name of Mr. Nathaniel Stevens. He came to be the principal at that year, and at that time the school was no longer called the Alex City School, but it was renamed Laurel High, and that was in 1949. And it was located where the Stevens Elementary School is now. The location has not changed. But during that time, the most important aspect of that school is that the only school system for the black community was there from the first grade through the 12th grade. Unlike the white school system was broken down into elementary, junior high, and high school, we only had that one school and one principal, and that was Mr. Stevens. I started the school in 1954 in the first grade, and I can remember so well that the thing that so impressive about me were the concern of our teachers. I can still remember my first grade teacher, who was then Mrs. Darnell. I can remember my second grade teacher, who was Mrs. Stevens, my third grade teacher, who was Mrs. Maxwell. Their concern and for us as students all the way up through high school, I can remember how you were judged by not the color of your skin, as we were told late in integration, but by the work you put in the school system. The teachers were genuine concerned about us. We could see them, and most of them either attended the churches that we went to, or they were in the community on a regular basis. So it wasn't like they would be here, then leave and go and disappear. And I found that to be very important to the system.
Yes, sir. And so not only have you been an advocate for education, but you've been someone who has really tried to advance Alex City and making sure that everybody had an equal opportunity to succeed, no matter what obstacles may be in front of them. And for those who don't know, you served with Community Action for, I think it was 30 years, 46 years. So I was a little off there. Yeah. So what was that experience, and how did that come about?
Oh, well, first of all, before we go there, let me just say this about the school system. I found that once I became a member of the board, that we were still on the federal sort of The federal government, we were decided that we had not, the integration system and the school system was not where it should be, so we were still under that federal rule that school, for instance, students from Coosa County could not come to Benjamin Russell and attend school. They had to stay within their own district. We finally got from under that court order once we showed that there was a joint effort to make sure that all schools and students were equally and that there was no more discrimination within the school system. But back to how I got into, when I graduated from Auburn University, my major was business administration and personnel management. I had hoped that I would be employed at Russ Corporation, but I had an opportunity to get a position with the Community Action Agency, actually starting out as a teacher's aide and a bus driver. And from there, I worked a couple of years. From there, got a promotion to work for the Head Start program as an assistant education director, and I did that for about 4 years. Then I got a promotion to work with the what was known as the Old Cedar program. That was a summer program where we worked with young kids to get them summer jobs. And from there, I became the director of the agency in 1974, I believe it was, and that was there until I retired. And actually, it'll be a year ago on the 30th of this month.
Wow. And you were actually just recently awarded something very special that reflects your commitment and dedication to the community. What was that?
Well, actually, I received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Atlantic City Chamber of Commerce, which was a total surprise to me. My daughter had called and asked me to attend the chamber meeting with her because they know I don't like surprises. So I thought I was going to the chamber to hear her speak. Later to find out when Tyrone Oliver, who we all know as Iceberg Slim, got up to introduce that person. And as I listened to him, and he mentioned that this person graduated from Auburn University, and I was the first African American to graduate from the School of Business, not from the college itself, but from that particular school. And then he said he's a member of Mount Calvary Baptist Church, and I'm like, oh, Lord, that's me. It really caught me by surprise, but I am deeply honored to have received that, not for my own personal recognition, but to think that when you do things for the community, that's the reward within itself.
Yes, sir. And through this interview series, we've had an opportunity to speak a lot about the business community, but sometimes I think the history of the black businesses in the community maybe get lost in translation sometimes. True. But during the Bib Street Quarter right there, could you speak a little bit about that and what those businesses were?
A lot of fond memories. I can remember that was where we went to get our hair cut. That was where the taxi location, there was a restaurant there. And the most important thing about it was that you could go down there and just have a lot of fun as a kid growing up, listening to the barbers talk about the days and the good old days. And I remember that the Bib Street Cleaners, my cousin John Boleware started that, and it's the only business that's still located there. And his son, Gary Boleware, now is the owner and proprietor of that. But the thing about the Bib Street location, it was on the back side of the town, and you didn't think much about it, but we were not allowed to have businesses up in the main street. The only black businesses had to be there in Bib Street. Again, you didn't think much about it back then, but as I reflect back on it, it was another form of segregation. It was segregation within the integrated system. And the black taxi drivers, one of them was a great uncle of mine, but they could pick up only black passengers. They were not allowed to go and get a white client to take them to wherever they needed to go.
And you talk a little bit about, you were saying, as a child, listening to those stories. What was it like for you and your experience growing up here in Alex City?
It was, to put it bluntly, it was sort of, we were shielded. Most of the black children in our community were shielded from the realities of segregation. We went to our all-black school. We lived in a black community. We played, and we went to black churches. So it was almost like it was expected to be that way forever. It was just part of growing up. And my childhood I enjoyed it. We had a lot of fun. We went to school, and in the summertime we played and enjoyed each other. When we would go to town, the only thing that I remember now that I reflect back is that when we went to town to purchase clothing and everything, I remember when my sister and my mother would take them into the store and they were looking at dresses, they would only be able to put the dress up against the side of the child or her back. They could never try on the clothes. When we went to get shoes, we couldn't try the shoes on. They would put the shoes down beside our feet, and we'd have to assume that was the right size, and that was it. And once we bought them, there was no taking them back. And those are the things that we just took for granted. And it's almost seemed mind-boggling now that those things happen, but that's the reality of what it was growing up in Alex City.
Yes, sir. And one of the best things, or one of the things I've enjoyed the most during the series is getting some funny stories or interesting story as it relates to the interviewer and or interviewee rather, and the community. Do you have any
Well,
of those?
one I can tell you that's really, it's a little scary but fun at the same time. As I said, back in those days, integration was not a part of it, so we had a department store on a VJ 5 and 10. That's where you go in there and buy little trinkets, little toys, and read comic books. In the back of the store, there were 2 water fountains. One had colored only, and the other one was white. Now, the white fountain was stainless steel, nice and clean. The color fountain was a porcelain and like hadn't been cleaned since it put in there. Well, my mother normally wouldn't let any of us go to town by ourselves because they knew the situation, but I think I was about 12 years old. So I went in VJ to look around. I went to the back where the water fountains were, and I looked around and there was nobody there. So I thought to myself, I'm going to see what this water tastes like. So I decided to drink out of the white, nice, fresh-looking fountain. And just as I began to drink the water, this lady who was the manager touched me on the back. And my heart nearly jumped out of my chest. She said, "Boy, can you not read?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I can read." She said, "What does that sign say?" It says white. And she said, "What does that sign say?" It said colored water. I said, "But when I pressed that sign that said color water, it didn't come out colored, it came out clear." So she kind of laughed at me, and she said, "Now you got to get out this store, and if you ever come back in here again without your mother, you're gonna be arrested." And I got out that store as fast as I could. But I think the telling her that the water wasn't colored kind of eased her tension, and it got me out that store because she could have easily have called the chief of police, and a 12-year-old kid could have been arrested for drinking out of a white fountain.
Yes, sir.
So like I said, it was kind of scary and funny at the same time.
Yes, sir. Well, Mr. Boleware, we appreciate you joining us today.
My pleasure.
And, giving your perspective and giving a little more insight into your background and your relationship with the community.
Well, let me just say this before I go, Scott. I have watched you grow up, and I've known your mama all her life. And I can say the community is truly blessed to have a young man like you operating in this city. I hope you don't ever decide to leave Alex City, because we need more young black men like you working in this community to move forward. I consider it an honor and a privilege to know you.
Well, I appreciate
Consider you like
that.
one of my sons, since your mama was like my sister.
Yes, sir. People may not know this, but there was a time where I was struggling a little bit in math, and you were somebody who helped me when I was a little bit younger.
I remember
in
that.
Tutoring services.
Yeah, Pinky called me and said, "Scott is not doing good." Don't worry, Pinky, I'll take care of that.
Yes, sir.
But
well,
you are an asset to this community, son.
Yes,
I
sir.
mean that with all my heart.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, Mr. Boleware, it's been an honor and a pleasure.
Same here, son.
Yes, sir. Well, this has been another edition of TPI Talk. My name is Scott Hardy. See you next time.